Hello, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the inside of the Lotus Eletre. So this is the first of a new kind of car. The Eletre is a large electric hyper SUV, they call it. It's a big electrically powered crossover. It is going to be followed by a four-door saloon with a coupe-ish sort of rear. That is going to be followed again by a smaller SUV, and only after that do we get a new small two-seat sports car. That will be built in Hethel in Norfolk. All of these four-door cars will be built on the same platform, and they'll all be built in the same factory in China. Lotus tells us that there is barely any commonality, if any at all, between the platform of this new car and other large Volvos. They say they started with some ideas in mind and they had some expertise, but there are almost no components at all shared between this car and any Volvo. But the similarities are there. So it's a kind of mixed metal, a lot of aluminium in the platform, but it's the kind of architecture you would expect. So it's a sort of skateboard platform with a big battery underneath. It's 112 kilowatt hours, 109 of that is usable, which gives a WLTP range of around 370 miles, apparently. There are three versions of Eletre. So there is a base one, there is the S, which is this one, and then there is the R. The base and this S model both have two identical motors, front and rear, 304 horsepower each, a system total of 603 brake horsepower. The R gets a much more powerful motor at the back. It gets a 600 brake motor at the back, so it's got 900 horsepower in total. There's multi-link suspension front and rear. There are air springs all round on all models. The base model gets fairly conventional anti-roll bars. Optional and fitted to this particular S model are 48 volt active anti-roll bars and active rear steer. Those are standard on the R model. It's got electromechanical power steering, and if none of this sounds like a Lotus, well, I'll tell you what also doesn't sound like a Lotus is a curb weight of 2.5 tons. But then this is a 5 metre long, 2 metre wide car. The base model starts at 90 grand, this S model is 105, and the top spec R is 100, 120, something like that. So it is priced and weighted like no other Lotus before it either. And I'll tell you what else is like no other Lotus. This interior. It is astonishing. So if you're used to Lotus's lightweight two-seat sports cars, maybe a 2+2, but they've sort of got an aluminium tub that pushes the passengers towards the middle, they're hard to get in and out of, they don't have the world's greatest fit and finish and everything else. This is nothing like that. This is plush beyond extreme. It's really solid. It feels impossibly well screwed together. It feels really well put together. Stitching is great. Gaps are great. There's no squeaks. There's no rattles. I get a very big touch screen here. Too much has gone onto the touch screen as usual. This has got optional cameras instead of mirrors. I'm glad that's optional because, as usual, they're shite. It's got loads of tech on board. It's got LiDAR to look around. The stuff that's migrated to the touchscreen where it's too much, so I get like up and down temperature controls on here, but all they do is the up and down. If I want to do anything else, if I want to change the distribution, that's all in a touchscreen, so I can't just move there's a vent here, I can't just swivel it left and right. I have to go into the touchscreen and tell it to stop or start, which is just, I don't know, I just think that is a bit daft. What's the point of that? I mean, it's just complication for complication's sake. But anyway, such as it is, material quality is really high, fit and finish is really good. I love a bit of Alcantara, so I'm very happy to find that in there. Steering wheel has got they call it sort of liquid metal. It's really nicely done metal switches, all cold to the touch. Really pretty cool. Unique stalks to a Lotus, which is nice because it's not just hoiked off of some parts bin somewhere else. It feels really good. If there is a problem, it's that in bright sunlight, not a problem right now, but was a problem when I drove this car yesterday, lots of it gets quite a lot of glare. You get quite a lot of glare in your eyes because there's quite a lot of shiny stuff and it's sculpted round. So at some point, one bit of it will always glare straight into your face. It's bit much, but anyway, that's what it is. The rear seats are huge. I sat behind my own driving position. You get I get 2 hands width of knee room, same in headroom. It's huge. The boot is big. This is a large car, as well it might be for one that costs £104,000. And so to the powertrain, well, it's electric, isn't it? So, you know, it's not making any noise. And although it's got 600 horsepower, it also weighs 2.5 tons. So it's not blindingly fast in a straight line. 0 to 60 is about 4.5 seconds. I mean, I grant you, that is still quite quick. But it feels less urgent and bombastic than something like a Porsche Taycan. You know, they just give you instant oomph right from the off. Teslas do the same. This doesn't. It's not as soft as, say, a Rolls-Royce Spectre, which I drove last week. You know, that introduced power really gradually. But as you tip into the power of this, it grows and it builds as you get faster and faster. And I think that's deliberate. It's not supposed to just suddenly shove you as you set off. You're supposed to introduce it, and then if you want lots of power, you stay in it and you get quite a lot more. It's pleasant. There is a 1-speed reduction gear on this model plus the base model. The R gets a 2-speed thing, which apparently helps, you know, give you a bigger shove in the back, because first is very low. But this, just, there's nothing to worry about. It goes up, it goes down. You can change the regen through 4 different settings. Even in 4, doesn't do one pedal driving, doesn't really slow you as urgently as some other cars. It could have a 5th 1 pedal setting that gave you a lot of lift off. Most cars give you more than this. You can go all the way through to coast, which actually on a motorway is nice, and you get these little flicky up and down switch on the back of the steering wheel, which is quite nice. So on this side of the steering wheel, I get a paddle that selects the drive mode. So let's come to the ride and handling, because traditionally that has been Lotus's thing, hasn't it? That is what they do. They make lightweight sports cars. They steer beautifully, really sweetly, really slickly. They're incredibly agile. They ride incredibly well for a sports car. But they haven't been 2.5-ton SUVs. The Eletre, because Lotus has now got loads of money to spend on R&D, it's set up an R&D centre in Germany, and that is because that's where a lot of engineers are, that's where a lot of expertise is, it's where a lot of its suppliers are, and that is where the Eletre has been primarily developed. I spoke to one of the dynamics engineers yesterday, and I said, so how much time has it spent on those rough, rutted roads, you know, around the old Lotus factory in Norfolk, where the cambers do this and that, and the road shifts and does that? He said, well, not very much. The engineers have come there to Germany to drive it, but primarily that is where it's been developed. And that is how it feels. It does not feel like a traditional Lotus to drive in almost any sense. I'm in Tour mode at the moment, so it's got adaptive dampers as well. Tour is a kind of, you know, an everyday setting. It's the same globally. So if you buy an Eletre in America, if you buy one in China, if you buy one in Europe, you will get the same suspension setup absolutely everywhere. Tour is a chilled one. They say it's quite loose, it's quite relaxed. It is actually. I mean, I'm in Norway where the roads are unbelievably good. It would be interesting to take it to some absolutely shonky roads in the UK and see how it feels, because when it's in its sort of primary ride, which concerns body control and stuff like that, when it does hit a bump, it leans and moves. The whole body moves all of a piece. It doesn't feel quite as left-right supple independently as a Lotus might. And a 48-volt anti-roll bar is kind of supposed to be able to give you that flexibility in a tall, heavy car of allowing the left and right sides to act independently when you want them to in a straight line, but then firm up and resist rolling corners. This resists rolling corners incredibly well, but actually in a straight line, it sometimes doesn't feel like it's got loads of articulation and wheel control independently of each other. It's incredibly capable. It's on 315 section tyres at the back, so that's over a foot wide at the back, which is just mind-boggling, and 275s on the front. That's the same for the R. Now the R will trouble its back tyres because it's got 600 brake back there, much more than this would much more than this car does, because it's got an even power split front and rear. And that is how it feels when you get this car leaning into a corner. One, its limits are extraordinarily high, so to get to them on the road, you have to take a big sort of leap to go, I mean, way too far, really. And in a lightweight Lotus sports car, although you don't approach its limits all the time, you get something back all the time because it doesn't weigh very much, and because the unassisted steering, or perhaps the hydraulically power assisted steering in the Emira and the Evora before it, you know, they give you lots back all the time, and it's nice to just sort of thread them along. You don't get this. If you want to explore this car's fun elements, you have to be going really quickly, and its fun elements are the fun elements of a 2.5 ton SUV. Steering is good, but it doesn't feel like a Lotus. It doesn't feel like that sort of oily, slick, instantly turny, grainy textured, feelsome stuff. It's got a lot of stability around straight ahead, and then as you take it off, it just picks up a bit of weight. I can't really tell that the active rear steer is doing stuff, that the roll bars are doing stuff. That's the idea. It's supposed to feel well integrated, and it does. This is a largely supple, brilliantly controlled, very, very capable, very flat cornering, very good, actually, a very refined, it's a very good car. It does what it is supposed to do. But let's remember, of course, it's basically a BMW iX or a Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT rival, if you like, rather than a traditional Lotus. Which brings me to the conclusion. Look, Lotus has made no more than 5,000 cars a year in its history. Now, within the next 4 years, it wants to be doing like 120, 150,000 cars a year. You can't do that on lightweight two-seat sports cars alone. And so, here we are. You know, what is the right car for Lotus to make? Is it a lightweight sports car? Well, that's fine, but the right car for Lotus to make really is a car that sells. This is, presumably, a car that will sell, and it is a very good one. Am I disappointed that it doesn't feel more Lotusy? I mean, I find it slightly hard not to, but I don't suppose that will matter to them or not at all. But where a Rolls-Royce Spectre, there's a video on this channel of that, they said, look, we want this car to feel like a Rolls-Royce first, and we want it to feel like an EV second, and it does. With a Porsche Taycan, I don't know if it feels like a Porsche first, but it feels like a Porsche very close second to feeling like an EV. This feels like an EV SUV first, and a Lotus maybe not at all. And maybe that doesn't matter. What it is a really good car of a new EV generation. But I'm intrigued to find out what that two-seat sports car that will be built at Hethel in a few years' time will be like. So thank you for joining me. I'll be back with another vid very soon. My colleague Richard Lane, I don't know when that'll be. My colleague Richard Lane is driving a Porsche 718 Spider, I think, in a couple of weeks, so he will be there with that. I'm doing a Unimog doco, long-length documentary, which I think you'll really like. It's really good. In the meantime, you can find me and my colleague Steve Cropley, who do a podcast called My Week in Cars every Wednesday from your favourite pod provider, and it's really good, honestly. Give it a listen. You'll find me on the socials at Automatic, 2Ts, Automatic Transmission, over on Instagram, Matty_Pryor on Twitter, if anybody's still on Twitter by the time you read this. You can find Autocar over at autocar.co.uk. You can find the magazine in print, as it has been every week since 1895, can you believe that? Or on digital subscription, which I recommend to you because there will very soon be access to the back catalogue of Autocar on that too. Meantime, thanks for joining me. I'd love it if you'd like and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like this vid, subscribe to the channel. Honestly, I will be a very happy camper. You will make me very pleased indeed. See you next time.